Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Shelsley Walsh for our last competitive meeting of 2020, this crazy year. Whether you're here in person, if you are, welcome, and I hope you enjoy this glorious weather we're blessed with at Shelsley this afternoon. If you're watching us online, again, welcome, and we'll do our best to convey to you the unique atmosphere of this historic place, which is really a jewel in the motor racing calendar, because Shelsley Walsh is the oldest racing track, motor racing track in the world that is still in continuous use. Shelsley started in 1905, 115 years ago, and competition here has continued with only 3 interruptions: World War I, World War II, and this crazy year of COVID-19 interrupted the first half or first 2/3 of the season. But Shelsley has managed, through an enormous amount of hard work and negotiating with the powers that be, to have hill climbs here. This is the 3rd of this year, and even better news is that for the last 2 meetings, we've been able to invite spectators to come in person. A limited number and 1 or 2 restrictions because of course, of the danger of COVID-19. But we've got a very full program of really interesting cars. Competitors have taken the opportunity to drag their cars out of hibernation, a lot of them, and bring them here, and a lovely mixture of cars to run. Yesterday we had an amazing event with a lot of top-level hill climbers, 1 or 2 of whom are here this afternoon, and some amazing times set on the hill. The hill record, remember, it's 1,000 yards long. The hill record stands, and it has stood for 12 years, to Martin Groves with a time of 22.58. And 2 weekends ago, in glorious weather like this, we had 3, I think, times down in the 22s, within a couple of tenths of Martin's record. And we've got a couple of our potential record breakers here this afternoon, so keep your fingers crossed. Conditions are pretty well ideal. It's warm, it's sunny, and we're in for some fantastic hill climbing. For those of you who haven't experienced Shelsley before, let's have a look at the hill itself. On my screen, you've got the start line down at the exit to the paddock, and indeed there is a pre-start line at which competitors have an opportunity to spin up their driven wheels, to clean the rear tires or the front tires if it's front-wheel drive, and to get a bit of heat into the tires. And we also have a timing beam 64 feet from the start, and for the 3 people in the world who don't know what this means, well, 2 seconds to 0 to 64 feet equates to 1 G of acceleration, 1 force of gravity. And that's a pretty quick acceleration. Yesterday we had a couple of starts in the 1.8s, which is more than 1 G. It's not dragster sort of acceleration, but it's pretty quick. From the start, the cars accelerate into our first bend, the left-hand bend at Kennel. And believe it or not, some of the top-line hill climbers, their cars are doing it about 100 miles an hour before they get there, which gives you an idea that the acceleration of a top-line hill climb car is probably the same or perhaps even better than that of a Formula One car. So Kennel is a key bend to set the speed for the rest of the hill. And from Kennel, it's a sort of curve to the right, then the curve to the left at Crossing. And Crossing, which you can see on the screen if you're watching on live stream, is a very daunting corner. It's approached at very high speed, and if you really grit your teeth, you can get round Crossing without lifting, but it does take a degree of courage to do that, because cars are going pretty quickly by then. And from Crossing, it's a flat-out blast up to the left-hand kink, which you can just see at the top of the screen, which is pretty well taken flat out. And that leads you into bottom S, where we have a speed trap. And remember, this is a narrow, steep country lane, basically. But at that speed trap into the left, 90-degree left-hander at the bottom S, cars have been approaching that at 136 miles an hour. And if you're watching in person, you've chosen a brilliant place to watch the cars coming into bottom S. It's quite, well, it makes your hair stand on end to a certain extent to see cars coming towards you at 130, 133, 136 miles an hour, braking heavily, of course, into bottom S. Bottom S, you can see that now on the screen, 90-degree left-hander, leading, of course, it's an S-bend into the right-hander at top S. But one of the tricks, or one of the important things at Shelsley, is not to let the car drift out too far to the right-hand side of the track, out of bottom S, because if you do that, you're all wrong lined up for top S. The trick is to keep to the middle of the road or even get over to the left so that you open up the entry to top S. You sometimes hear us talking about the drain cover. There's a drain just on the inside of top S. You can just see it if you're watching on screen. Occasionally we mention whether a car's gone over the drain cover or not. Probably it's best not actually to go over the drain cover. You need to, the apex is a bit further around the corner. Anyway, that's top S, leading to the finishing straight, and a fairly steep uphill blast to the finishing line, which really is a product of power. I won't say irrespective of the weight of your car, but the more power you've got, the quicker you'll go over the finishing line. And we have recorded some very high speeds over the finishing line, torque of sort of 145, 150 miles an hour, which leads into the top paddock. And you might think, gee whiz, are those cars ever going to be able to stop from that speed? Well, they do, but occasionally they don't have. If you have a car with not very effective brakes, you wonder whether you're going to end up in the hedge the other side of the field. Therefore, we've got a sand trap that you can steer your car into, and that'll stop it. Top paddock's a nice place for competitors to meet their fellow competitors, to discuss their runs, to have a gossip, because the cars wait at the top of the hill and return down the hill in batches. One of the delights of Shelsley is that we don't have a return road, which means that every now and then, after 20 cars or so, the cars come back down the hill, which gives you an opportunity to wave to the drivers and they'll wave back. We're ready for action, and action in the form of a little Toyota MR2, the third iteration of the MR2, in the hands of Alan Broome, who lives fairly locally in Kidderminster. They're nice, these little MR2s. They've got lovely road holding. They're not immensely quick, but they are neat and tidy. The only downside, if you want to go away for a couple of weeks, is that there's virtually no luggage room at all. But if you're looking for luggage room, you don't buy an MR2, or you don't use it to go away for a couple of weeks. So, Alan Broome is on the line, ready to go. We've got the 64 feet timing beam. We've got a timing check at Kennel, which is the left-hander, so called because that's where the hunt used to keep their hounds. That's where Alan is now. He heads towards crossing. He reached Kennel in 9.88 seconds, crossing 17.15, and we've got a speed trap, as I told you, into the bottom S, and Alan takes that at 58 miles an hour over what we call the Dragon's Teeth on the inside of bottom S, safely out and heading towards the finishing line. He's followed by John McQuillan in a 1275 Mini Cooper, the famous tiny little Mini Cooper. Looking at them nowadays, you wonder, how on earth can you squeeze four full-grown adults into that? But Alec Isigonis knew what he was doing when he designed the Mini. It was sensational at the time. Really, it is pretty sensational now. Time we've got for Alan Broome in the MR2, 44.09. And off the line, you'll see in a few minutes, comes Adele Hunt in another Mini Cooper. So John McQuillan heads for the finish in his 1275 Mini, 48.39. Finishing speed of 54. Adele through the speed trap at 64, so 14 miles an hour or so quicker than John. and takes a nice line round top S. No dramas, bit of smoke, heads for the finishing line. Facing a 48.39, she's going to be quick than that with a 42.11 and finished at 67. Chris Buffton, not in a Mini but in a Citroen Saxo, sort of step sister of the Peugeot 106, makes an extremely good starter car for hill climbing, and a lot of our champions have started either in little saloons like this or in Caterhams or Westfields, and gradually they go faster and faster, as you can see. Chris Buffton, 43.37. Adrian Reed, in the first of our Lotus Elise, the lovely little lightweight Elise. This is the Mark II version. We're in a class for serious production cars up to 2 litres, and the Elise, you could certainly say, is serious production. It was the car that virtually saved Lotus and sold in large numbers, but not as many large numbers as the Mazda MX-5, which is by some margin the world's most popular sports car. And here's Sept Cartwright in his example. Adrian Reed in the Elise, 35.98, 35.98, and 82 over the finishing line. Seb taking it pretty easily in his well-used MX-5. He's followed by James Evans, who had a bit of an adventure this morning. He had to nudge the back at top S and did a certain amount of damage to the bodywork at the front of the car. Fortunately, no harm done to the mechanicals, and after doing a lot of sorting out and taping up, James is having a run, which is great to see. Time is 48.55 for Sept Cartwright in the MX-5. James has nearly finished in his Impreza and records a 41.59. Steve Jackman well on his way in the MGF. Where is he? Here he is, into bottom S. The MGF, again, for a time until the MX-5 appeared, was the best-selling sports car in this country. It was a great success for MG. Mid-engine, same engine, the K-Series Rover engine that you get in the Lotus Elise, and Steve records 38.11. I mentioned Peugeot 106s as the stepsister of the Citroen Saxo. Well, here is one in the hands of Anna-May Furness. Nice hot hatch, and it's very hot. It's a quick car. 81 into bottom S is going some. And Anna-May's heading for a mid-30s, 36.7 over the finishing line. David Meek in another slightly hotter version of the MX-5 with a hard top. Hard top adds weight, but also is aerodynamically better than the soft top with the windscreen up. So David heads for the finish. Next up is another great car for beginning hill climbing in. James Lovell in his Renault Clio Sport 197, 197 horsepower. That's pretty good. David Meek's time in the Mazda 39.19. So they're coming thick and fast, and that's just the drivers. Here's the Clio, and another Elise follows in the hands of Tony Adams. This is much modified, it's got lots of power. You can extract over 200 horsepower from the 1.8 K-Series engine. It was a very good engine, lightweight. As you can see, 87 into bottom S for Tony, but James Lovell, 38.05 in the Clio. We've looked at a sort of standard MX-5, then a modified one, now much more modified one in the hands of Dean Cubitt. Let's see, there he is. How quick is he into bottom S? Interestingly, not as quick as Tony Adams in the previous car. But safely round top S and heads for the finishing line. Meanwhile, Paul Howden in MGF, another MGF takes off. Time for Dean Cubitt, 36.71. The MGF, the early MGFs, not the TF, had an interesting suspension system using rubber and water, hydroelastic, rather like the original Mini, but the later, the TF, reverted to standard steel springs. So this is the MGF with 1795 cc, well 1800, we call it K-Series Rover engine. So he's followed by something a bit more exotic, the Porsche Cayman of David West with 3.4 litres of flat 6 engine, mid-engine of course. Time for Paul, 40.93. David, lots more power in the Cayman, but still 72 into bottom S. It's not heavily modified, so it makes a great road car, and it's a pretty car. My personal view is that it's the prettiest of the current Porsches. So David's Porsche over the line, 37.65. First of all, Audi TTs, the Mark 1, the early Mark 1 Audi TT, four-wheel drive, so 2.24 for the first 64 feet, which is quick and indicates four-wheel drive rather than standing on the start line with wheels spinning. And a lovely car has just taken off from the start. It's Rodney Isles in the Alfa Romeo 4C. Time for Graham Godfrey, 36.34. Rodney was a triple, 3 times sprint champion in this country in fierce racing cars. He told me that he used to much prefer the wide open spaces of airfields and racetracks where sprints take place mostly, rather than the confines of a narrow lane like this at Shelsley. But nevertheless, he's doing really well in the 4C, and it's such a pretty car, carbon fiber body. His time, 39.75. Another Porsche Carrera in the hands of John Fordy, 3.2 litre flat 6, but very much in classic rally spec with all those lights on the front. So you'd imagine booming through the forest stages in this lovely 911. They're tough cars, perfect for classic rallying. Records a 37.99. Let's see how Rod Fisher gets on in the Porsche Boxster. Again, 3.4 litres like the Cayman, but soft top, and a very big seller for Porsche. When did the Boxster first appear? 15 years ago or so. Has sold like hotcakes. You can pick up an early one in good condition for not a great deal of money, and they have legendary qualities of road holding. We've got a time for John Fordy of 37.99. Rod Fisher heads for the finishing line. He's followed by another Cayman S in the hands of Phil James. This is a quicker car. As you can hear from the exhaust pipe, a certain degree of engine modification. Rod Fisher, 37.51 in the Boxster. Fearsome car just leaves the line. Roy Stanley, who frequently in the past has been fastest closed car up the hill in this fearsome Turbo 4 RS, turbocharged, producing lots of horsepower. I hate to think the number, but it's sort of in the more than 500 horsepower. It's an amazingly quick car, and it's good to see Roy back. He doesn't compete very often nowadays, but he's taken the opportunity to bring this car out into the sunshine. Phil James's time in the Cayman, 36.91. What have we got on the hill? An Alfa Romeo GT with the 3.2, the famous Busso 3.6 3.2 V6 engine. We've got a time for Roy Stanley, 31.34, and the first of our runs this afternoon over the 100 miles an hour over the finishing line. The Alfa Romeo GT is a very nice, not too heavy car, not as heavy as the Brera, and the ones with the V6 engine are pretty rare, and they're getting more valuable, the nice ones that have survived. Howard Davis, time 40.51. We're into Caterham's with Bruce Bosley. Kicks off, in fact, he's the only car in Class B1 road cars, specialist production cars up to 1700 cc, so he'll win the class. And he's followed by this fabulous new Aston Martin Vantage shed by Andrew Fraser, and together the two of them have built this car. Last year, and for the last few years, they competed in a GT4 Aston Martin with a 4.7 litre engine. They acquired a GT4 body shell from ProDrive and themselves have built this car up for hill climbing to make it as light as possible, and it's some 400 kilos lighter than the standard Aston Martin Vantage. It has a sequential rear-mounted gearbox which is much quicker than the gear change in the earlier cars, and they're really getting the hang of it. Despite not having such a big engine as the previous car, it is actually quicker. Graham Manton's with us in the Fisher Fury. Let's just see a time for Andrew Fraser in the Aston, 33.61 and 96 miles an hour over the finishing line. Fisher Fury, specialist cars for competition. 1800cc probably indicates another K series, and Graham Manton brings this first batch of cars on the hill to an end. So you see red flags on the start line, and pretty soon we'll see those cars that have been up the hill coming back down. In normal times, spectators are welcome to come into the paddock to have a look at the cars, to chat to the drivers. It's unlike serious circuit racing like Stalag Silverstone, where you're surrounded by wire fences, can't get anywhere near the paddock. Hill climbing is a different game altogether. It's much more friendly, to the degree that competitors will help each other out. If your car's in trouble and needs a bit of mechanical help, other competitors will crowd around and offer help and advice. And I mean, people say it's particularly at Shelsley, it's a garden party in lovely surroundings, just spoilt every now and then with a bit of motor racing, but that's a rather cynical view. But it is a lovely part of the country. If you're watching this from the States, Australia, wherever, welcome online. But we're quite near the city of Worcester, famous historic city of Worcester, sort of in the West Midlands, middle of the country. 2 hours or so from London. And so if you're due a holiday in the UK and have never been to Shelsley, please come, because it really is the most beautiful place to visit. The Team Valley, which is where we are, the River Team flows along the bottom of the valley. It's a steep-sided valley both sides. You can see in the distance there the other side of the Team Valley. It's that beautiful rolling countryside. My wife calls it storybook countryside, the children's storybooks with little tractors climbing up steep hills and woods and things. It's just like that. I was telling you a bit about the Aston Martin of Andrew Fraser and Tim Painter. They've done pretty much all the work themselves to develop this car. They got they got a body shell from ProDrive, which had belonged to a GT4 race circuit car, which had had an argument with a V12 Aston Martin, which flew over the top of it and did a certain amount of body damage. So it was available from ProDrive, and the two of them didn't need the bent bit of body. It had the full ProDrive roll cage inside, and over 3 years or so they've been developing this car specifically for hill climb, whereas the previous one, which we saw for the last 3 years or so, was pretty much a circuit car in circuit trim. It has launch and traction control, data logging. The engine revs, 4.3 litre engine revs to about 7,500 RPM. So it's a lighter engine, and it's a stronger engine, funnily enough, than the 4.7. So it'd be good to see, we'll see that car in this coming batch, I think. But in the meantime, coming to the line is this much modified Peugeot 205, 1900cc, well, slightly over 1900cc engine in the hands of Darren Balster. Lots of people say that the Peugeot 209 is the best hot hatch ever, particularly in 1.9 litre form, and values of them having dipped because so many of them ended up backwards in the hedge. The ones that survived and have been looked after are now becoming very valuable. You can tell from the sound this one much modified. It's in pretty much full race spec. 2.66 off the line for Darren. Should be in the 80s or maybe even more into bottom S. Yeah, 85. Applies a full blast of front wheel drive to drive him through both S's. Heads for the finishing line. Will be again about 85 miles an hour to the finish. 94, I was wrong. Excellent, for a time of 33.94. Do you remember the Mark II Ford Escort? Well, Ford Escorts Mark I and Mark II were brilliant rally cars. Here's a nice example in the hands of Dave Moore. Looking again in pretty much rally spec with lots of lights on the front. Classic rallying, perfect car to go classic rallying. Perfect line through the S's, kept well to the left before the right-hander. A little bit of smoke, which means the clearances in the engine is nice and loose. This car, previous Peugeot, had famous drivers, including Willem Towett. Talk about him a bit later, but in the meantime, here's the Aston again. 4.3 rear-mounted gearbox, with not with paddles, but with a big lever for the right hand. Now, why has it gone slowly? Oh dear, Tim brings it to a halt. I hope that wasn't the commentator's curse put on it. Maybe it just missed a gear, but Tim will be proceeding slowly to the finishing line. We won't record his finished speed. There's a white Golf, Volkswagen Golf, CY11 ETR, abandoned on the road. Owner definitely needs to move it. And if it's your car, it's possible that you've walked in without being checked for COVID. So if your car is the CY11 ETR, it needs to be moved and you need to get checked on the entrance gate. Please do that. Thanks.
I'll leave that there.
Okay. Okay. Where are we now? Tim Painter's time, 42.71. He won't want to remember that, and I hope it's nothing too serious, but good to see that car again. Here's a rare and very powerful car, the Vauxhall Chevette HSR with a 2.6 litre Vauxhall engine in the hands of Gary Morgan. Haven't seen this car before. Maybe it's its first outing here at Shelsley. He'll put me right if I'm wrong, but it's 77 into bottom S. Again, nice and smoky. Or is it dust? Track. Anyway, it's a 34.55 and a speed of 90, which is quick. Back to Porsches with Andy Norris's well-known supercharged Porsche Carrera 3.3. Quite an early car, which means it's slightly narrower than the much later GT3s, but it's quick, 88 into bottom S. And he's followed by a car that we haven't seen for a long time, sadly. It's Roger Banks in the fabulous Audi S4 4.2 litre turbocharged. I don't know if that still holds the closed car record here, because I haven't got a program in front of me, but it certainly did for a long time. It's immensely powerful, as you can tell. Slightly snaky out of top S, and it'll be quick. 116 over the line, 29.03. Not many closed cars do 116 over the line. I will ask to check whether Roger still holds the saloon car record up Shelsley. In the meantime, Oliver Wright in the GTI Peugeot. Something again has gone awry between the S's. It looks as if it ran out of gears, so maybe the following car, the Elise of Paul Jones, will have to be red flagged, but I think probably Oliver will get to the finish in good time. He does indeed, that's good. Be embarrassing if the car behind has to slow down or stop. Here's the Elise 88 again into bottom S, much modified engine producing, what might it be, 160 or so horsepower. He's followed by well-known hill climber Phil Cook in this very rapid Caterham with the 1600cc bike engine, Superlight R. It's a very good mixture, the lightweight Caterham with a powerful motorcycle engine. We've got a time for Paul Jones of 34.48, and Phil accelerates away over the line. It'll be in the 90s, I would think. It's more, it's 106. I'm being pessimistic today. He's followed by Graham Frankland in a Westfield. Westfields and Caterham look so similar, but this one with the Rover K series engine producing about 200 bhp. And Graham crosses the line with a 33.89. That's a good time. Followed by John Goodrich in his Caterham Supersport with a 2-litre, I believe, Vauxhall engine. Similar speed into bottom S, so this run should be in the 33s or early 34s. We'll very soon see. Meanwhile, John Bradshaw, I think also with a K-Series engine, but an even more powerful one than Graham Franklin's. We've got a time for John Goodrich, 33.49, even quicker than Graham Franklin. That's great. Let's see what John Bradshaw could do. I think he might be quicker than the pair of them. I stand to be corrected. No, it's a 30.02. Oh, I bet he wishes he was 3,000th quicker and was in the 29s. But 30.02 is an excellent time. What can Craig Spooner do? Well, he's got a 2-litre Vauxhall in his car. But I don't think it's in the same sort of tune as John's. This, I think, will be in the 34-35 mark. 33.83. Jerry Neary, long-time hill climber in this car. He's had it for a long time, but now it's got a Honda Blackbird engine. It's only 1200cc, but it's very light, of course. And 78 is respectable for Jerry into bottom S. He's followed by Becky Manton in the rare car, the Fisher Fury. Fisher kit cars, build them up into very effective little hill climb cars. Jerry 36.59 in the Blackbird powered Caterham. Here's Becky rounding the S's, taking the right line and middle of the track all the way up to the finish. Now here's a lovely car. This is the fabulous little Fiat 500 of Ian Metcalf. How much Fiat it's got is a question that you don't ask Phil. Probably one door handle perhaps, but I suppose it looks like a Fiat 500, but at the back of it it's got a very powerful Swift Tune A-Series BMC engine, similar to the engine in a Mini, but Swift Tune do a fantastic job producing masses of power, and this little Fiat is an immensely quick car, 34.37. And he's followed by an interesting car, Andrew Burt in the Mark 32 Mallock. We all know Mallock's for making Clubman's cars, which were front engine, mostly with pushrod Ford engines, but this, they made 10 Mark 32s, rear engined, of which I think this is the only one left in this country. The rest went around the world and one was destroyed in a fire, but Andrew Burt finishes with a 33.04. And it's good to see Radicals coming to the hills. Radicals have been having race series in this country for a long time, and indeed in Europe as well. I'm not sure about the States, but there are lots of them, and we've got a couple of regular hill climbers using them. David Mitchell, perhaps the most regular of all. Good time though, 31.72. Robin Nicholson, we had the sad news this week of the death of Kim Johnson. Here's the Mallock with which Kim was very much associated, and it's good that Robin has brought the car here today, which reminds us of the great Kim. 94 into bottom S. This car's got a massive hill climbing history, been driven by all sorts of prominent hill climbers. And records 97 miles an hour for a 30.84. Here's a car I haven't seen before. It's called the Lapel Genesis. It's got a 1-litre Honda engine. Looks a bit like a Radical, but it's I think it's unique. I'm not sure if it's a kit car or whether Neville Thompson has manufactured it from scratch. If he wants to come and talk to me about it, that would be great. But it's a nice, neat little car. I don't think it's been to Shelsley before, so Neville is probably learning the course still. But nevertheless, a respectable time of 39.53. We've got a single-seater on the line in the shape of the OMS 2000 of Nigel Pitt. Time for Robin Nicholson was 30.84. Time for Neville Thompson, 39.53. Here's Nigel. 2.48 for the first 64 feet, which is very respectable. 1100cc bike engine. Sharing this car with Claire Lightwood. It's got a Suzuki 1-litre engine and records a good time in the 29s, 29.79, speed of 98. Here's one of our stars of yesterday, Alan Warburton, in the fabulous GR59 Gould. Which has a Hayabusa engine stretched to 1600, means bored and stroked. It's an immensely quick car, and Alan and his son David really starred yesterday in the shootout at the end of the meeting. 117 into bottom S, and masses of acceleration. It'll be a similar speed over the finishing line. 116 and a 25.68. Excellent. Certainly will be in the runoff at the end of the day, as pretty certainly will be Bernard Kevill in the OMS 28 with its 2.6-litre V8 engine constructed by Terry Davis of two 1300cc bike engines on a common crankcase. I accused this car yesterday of having about 500 horsepower, and Bernard was very quick to tell me that actually it's only about 350, which is enough to take him up the hill in 27.13 and record 118 over the finishing line. Now a fabulous car comes to the start line in the hands of Lindsay Summers. This is the amazing DJ Firestorm, brand new car last year but re-engined this year with a Cosworth XD. That's the IndyCar engine but without the turbo, producing around about 500 horsepower in a car weighing only about 400 kilos, so 100 miles an hour already, and speed built through crossing. Lindsay sharing the car with her son Alex, who was hill climb champion a couple of years ago. Lindsay taking the sensible middle of the track line, but it'll be quicker over the line. It's 139. Wow, 139 over the line to record a 26.9. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Lindsay and Alex in the top 10. Time to draw a breath, but to have a look at this lovely MGA of Ken Williamson, MGA was the last MG sports car with a separate chassis. The MGB that followed, of course, was monocoque. This one with a 2-litre engine, I think it's an MGB engine, but the MGA was such a pretty car and had very nice handling and road holding, as nice, perhaps even nicer than the MGB. So the MGB sold in massive numbers compared with the MGA. Ken Williamson, last car in the batch, records 42.18. We've got some messages. Eddie Walder, who commentates here regularly but sadly has been marooned at home because of this horrible COVID, he tells me that the Pell's car is not appearing here for the first time. It's appeared 5 times before. Thanks, Eddie. Keep me on the right track, please. V8 Firestorm says, go, Lindsay. I'm not sure if that's Alex himself saying that. Adrian Passman asks us, do you ever have bikes and cars mixed hill climb? Well, we do on one normal meeting of the year, which I think is the September meeting. We usually have 3 or 4 classes of bikes mixed in the sense that they're at the same meeting. They don't, of course, come in the same batch as the cars, but sometimes they have their own runoff at the end of the meeting as well. And it's part of the Hill Climb and Sprint Bike Championship. So it's certainly worth coming and watching the bikes here at Shelsley. Eddie Walder putting me right again. There's a rear-engine Malloch at the Channel Islands with Len Amy. Well, I said it's the only one on the in the UK, so I'm not totally wrong. Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, but another thing that Eddie does confirm is that Roger Banks's fearsome Audi, the 4.2 Audi Quattro saloon, which we've just seen rumbling up the hill, does still hold the closed car course record in a time of 28.71, which he's held since 2011, so 9 years. I'm not sure if that's the longest standing course record here at Shelsley, but it stood for a long time. Oh, but then Shelsley Walsh say, Mike Endine, where's that gone? Broke the record, and so the record belongs to Mike Endine, but that's disappeared off my screen, so maybe Shelsley Walsh have had second thoughts about that. I'll leave Eddie to argue that with Shelsley. We haven't had any messages from around the world yet, I don't think. Of course, the USA, well, it'll be waking up. And Australia, it's the middle of the night, so can't blame them for not watching the live stream. But it was fun yesterday having messages from all over the place. Eddie, as always, says, and he's quite right, no argument, I'm right. Well, he always is, so it's far be it from me to argue with him. Okay, we're ready for our next batch, which will be batch 3. And should be kicked off by Robert Penrose in the OMS. Number 788. Indeed it is. Robert down from Darlington in this 1 litre OMS CF, which means carbon fibre rather than a space frame, carbon fibre tub. A rather hesitant start, cost him a second, nearly a second or so, 3.10, 64 feet. So Rob is learning his way up Shelsley into bottom S at 63. Nice colour scheme of this car. I don't know whether you call it purple or mauve, but it's different from the usual red, white and green. Heads for the finish under 40 seconds, so 38.81 and 91 is respectable. On the line, this fabulous Empire Wraith in the hands of Clive Austin. Look at the aerodynamics of this car. It produces masses of downforce. It's still only just over 1 litre with a Suzuki GSXR engine, Empire Wraith. Aerodynamics developed with the help of Willem Toet, who was chief aerodynamicist for Ferrari F1 10 or so years ago, and a fearsome hill climber himself. So Clive off the line in exactly 2 seconds, exactly 1 G of acceleration. Doesn't lift at all at either crossing or the kink, and 103 into S approach. Nice, neat, tidy run. Don't put the commentator's curse on it. And it'll be quick over the line. It is. It's 103 and 27.61 might well get Clive into the runoff at the end of the day. In the meantime, Stuart Bickley in a Jedi, again 1 litre. Stuart is through the trap at 109. Neat little car, and very quickly through the S sector. I'll talk about the S sector in a minute, but 7.91 through the S's is extremely rapid to record a 26.8, which again might well get him into the top 10 runoff at the end of the day. Next up is Claire Lightwood, sharing the car with Nigel Pitt, which we saw in the previous batch. That's the 1.1 litre, 1100cc OMS 2000. Again, an interesting purpley colour. And Claire neatly into kennel, having recorded 2.45 for the first 64 feet. Fairly gently round crossing, so it'll be in the 70s, I think, into bottom S. It is exactly 70. So Claire is getting the hang of this car, keeps it away from the drain cover. Nice, neat, tidy run to record a time of 36.53. Max Hawkes brings the Van Diemen, the Formula Ford Van Diemen Classic 1984 Formula Ford, narrow body, wide track, slight touch of oversteer on the way through bottom S. We used to have lots of Formula Fords having their own class. It's rather dwindled. I think we've only got a couple today. That's Max Hawkes and Sarah Bosworth. Here comes Sarah. In the meantime, Max has finished with a 36.41. Sarah was here yesterday having fun. It was a glorious day yesterday, as it is today. Possibly the last lovely weekend of summer. After Sarah, we'll see Steve Morgan in the Empire Evo. Here he comes. And that's the quickest 64 feet we've had so far, 1.9 for Steve Morgan. That's a brilliant start. This is going to be a quick run. Steve was out in this car for the first time this year at the last meeting, and he said it was really quite scary. He couldn't remember how quick it was. Well, it is quick. S sector 8.47 and a time of 28.07. Might not be just within the top 10, we'll see, but a great run. Andrew Short takes off, again 1.97. Excellent start. A slight wiggle out of kennel as he puts the power down. Won't have cost him, might have cost him a hundredth or so, but no more than that. And an S approach of 94. Heads for the finish as Rob Anscombe takes off in the OMS Hornet. So Rob Anscombe into bottom S. Andrew Short's time 29.56. Rob Anscombe nearly over the line. He is indeed with a 29.45. Next up, David Warburton is here. He's not on my entry list. That's good. Alan's son. Maybe he is. Yeah, he is. He's on the. He's running, of course, in a different batch from his dad in the GR59. Alan Warburton took this car up at 25.68, so it's a family battle. 1.98, 64 feet. David's not hanging around at all. This will be extremely quick. Dad did 117, I think, into bottom S. David does 122. Wow. Straightens it up between the S's. 125 over the line, 118 to record a 24.67. Excellent. Is that our first run in the 24s today? I think it is. Nice to see Paul Hames back in another GR59. This one with a turbocharged 1300cc bike engine. Number 122. Paul, 10 years or so ago, used to share a car with Martin Groves. Now he's in the GR59. .209 for the start. Doesn't lift at kennel. Wide entry, but nice and close into the bank at crossing. 119 S approach. Paul is not hanging around. Pops and bangs. And 24.75. Nearly matching David Warburton's time. 135 over the finishing line. That is quick. Simon Andrews on the line, sharing with Bernard Kevill. Not as much power as some, round about 350 bhp with this V8 engine, but it's a lightweight engine. The whole car is pretty light, so 350 horsepower takes it into the bottom as at 115. And yesterday, both Simon and Bernard were in the top 10 runoff. 27.12 for Simon Andrews. On the line, multiple British hill climb champion Trevor Willis in the car that he's won the championship in a number of times. 1.88 launch control start, absolutely brilliant, using every inch of the track, the lower half of the hill, and it's 125 into bottom S. Not quite as quick as 133, which Trevor did yesterday. It'll be 130 or so over the line, 136 to record 23.64. Fabulous. Well done, Trevor. Brilliant driver. Now, Alex Summers, proudly carrying number 2 on the car, means second in last year's Hill Climb Championship, when the car had a different engine. Now it's got the Cosworth XD, which takes him into bottom S at 134. S sector, his time between the S's, 7.42, is as good as anybody, and that's really rapid. 140 finishing speed and exactly 23 seconds. Alex wished he'd gone a thousandth of a second quicker and got in the 22s, but nevertheless that is by a margin the quickest run so far today. James Thacker brings us into the class for pre-75, pre-1975 classic saloons and sports cars in this dinky little Austin Healey Sprite Mark 1, the famous Frog Eye Sprite, again another car that Kim Johnson was very much involved with. Frog Eye with the hardtop, which wasn't provided by the factory, but lots of people like Les Leston developed a great business with various spares and accessories for Frog Eye Sprites, wire wheels, hardtops and things like that. Here's another lovely MGA. We saw the earlier one, or the one earlier. This is Ted Elwes in his MGA, which is always beautifully prepared. Again, with a 1950cc MGB engine. I think the 1954 Le Mans MG fielded a prototype car that looked like an MGA, but was in fact really the prototype of the MGA. And subsequently MGAs raced pretty successfully, particularly at Sebring, places like that. First of our Mark II sprites, when the Austin Healey Sprite had a rather more conventional body than the original Frog Eye. James Thacker records a 37.40, and Ted Elwes in the MGA 41.11. Here's Paul DeVille in the Mark II Austin Healey Sprite, and he's followed by Clive Buffy in a drop head coupe Lotus Elan, the famous Elan, really inspired Mazda to produce the MX-5, and you can see the similarity. MX-5 is really a tribute to Lotus and the Elan. Elan, very lightweight, backbone chassis, the whole thing weighed, I think, somewhere around 850, 900 kilos, had the famous Lotus twin cam engine, and was revolutionary in the sense that it was the first sports car with really soft suspension. You know, the belief used to be that you had to have really stiff suspension to get good road holding. Well, Colin Chapman proved that that wasn't right, and Clive records a 42.05 for the last car in that batch. So they'll be coming down the hill. If you've just joined us, either here or online, welcome to glorious Shelsley Walsh in glorious weather. We have been lucky this year. We've only had 3 competitive meetings here at Shelsley, and all of them have been blessed with lovely weather. I said that Paul Hames shared a car with Martin Groves, but I was wrong. That was Paul Ransom. Paul Hames shared with Alan Warby. Again, Eddie Warder comes to the rescue. Message from Adrian Passman. I'm not sure whether he's in this country, but he says brilliant live streaming. Hats off to all involved. Really enjoying watching the coverage yesterday and today. Well, you're right. Oh, incidentally, I must mention again the white VW Golf CY Charlie Yankee 11 ETR has been abandoned on the road. It's parked illegally, and therefore the cops might tow it away, so beware. And the possibility is the owner walked in rather than driving in, so may not have been checked at the gate. So owner of white Golf CY11 ETR, please move it, bring it into the, won't cost anything to bring it into the car park, but it means you'll get checked, and that's important too. The last thing we want is for Shelsley to be accused of spreading COVID-19, and the team that has organized this event has worked incredibly hard to comply with all the anti-pandemic regulations. Everybody in the paddock has to wear a face mask. There's one-way traffic, pedestrian traffic up and down the hill, so it's not really fair to get in without being checked. So CY11 ETR, please could you move your car, bring it into the car park. We've got some lovely cars on the front row of the car park. Members of the Midland Automobile Club with classic and interesting cars tend to be parked, lined up on the front row of the car park. But great to see the car park nice and full with cars. So thanks for coming. It's a pity it's our last meeting of the year, but hopefully 2021, all this rotten pandemic business will be over and will allow us to run a full season. Do you remember the cottages on the other side of the paddock from the start line, which used to be owned by Stratstone, the motor company, motor dealer company, and who used it as VIP place for guests to Shelsley, Stratstone, and they used to line up their latest expensive cars outside. Well, they decided to stop that, and those two cottages are now, as of yesterday, we're launching them as holiday accommodation. So when there's next a break in transmission or break in hill climbing, I'll tell you a little bit more about the holiday accommodation at Shelsley. But in the meantime, one of my favorite cars comes to the line, and it's Bryony Serrell in this glorious Elva Mark 7, the sort of little sports racing car that competed in period against the Lotus 23s. A lot of them went to the States, had BMW engines. This one went to the States and came back, but it's fitted with a Lotus twin cam engine. Built Ken Nichols down on the south coast. Elva, she goes, appropriate name for the car, and they built lots of cars, road cars, racing cars, even Can-Am cars were built by Elva. And Brian's had this car for a year or so and really loved it, and you can understand why. 34.25. Here's Bill Drysdale in the Porsche 904. That is, he calls a Porsche 904 FF, which means fabulous fake, I think, because this wasn't built by Porsche. It was built by Bill, all on his own in the garage at home. It has got a Porsche 911 engine and gearbox. It started life with a four-cylinder Porsche 912 engine, which gave all sorts of problems for Bill, but since it's been fitted with the six-cylinder engine, it's gone really well. And it's a tribute to Bill's skill. He will be pleased to be under 40 seconds, 39.51. Delightful character. Bill initiated the Old Codgers class. Old Codgers class is an award every year for the fastest driver over the age of 70. And Bill's latest idea is to have a senior class of Codgers for people over 80, and he's determined to call that class the Coffin Dodgers. So, and indeed there are quite a few. Well, there are one or two well-known hill climbers who qualify for the senior Codgers. one of whom, of course, being Billy Morris, who sadly isn't here today. He was at the last meeting, but who competes in the Pilbeam and has done for many a long year. And Bill was born in the same year as ERA R4D, if that means anything to anybody. I think that was 1936. So sadly, number 154 has been turned around and gone away from the line, which means probably a mechanical problem. But in his place comes the pretty little Lotus 35 of Malcolm Thorne. Formula 2 Lotus. Malcolm and Sarah both driving Lotuses. Sarah yesterday won the Paul Matty Championship by a whisker. She's so thrilled. Malcolm's Type 35, in period, most of the Type 35s had Cosworth FVA engines, but this one has got the twin cam, and in fact I believe always has had the 1600 Lotus twin cam engine. Malcolm won the Chateau Impney hill climb last year outright. Sadly, Chateau Impney is no more. Well, the hill climb is no more. The hotel is closed. Let's hope it will be revived one time soon. But Malcolm 84 into S approach. He's also got a Formula 1 Lotus 24 with the 1.5 litre BRM V8 in the back, which is for sale if you want to go serious classic racing at places like Goodwood. Malcolm, 32.28, speed 91 now. Sarah, this is a real family battle. Sarah is often quicker than Malcolm. She has had a slight false start, but the great news is that the rear wheels didn't cross the start line, so she can go back and have another go. She's a very determined lady, and she's determined to beat her husband, as all most wives are. Yeah, nicely this time. Good one, 2.13 for Sarah. She was a great athlete when she was younger, long distance runner. And they live just the other side of the valley, so they're part of the Team Valley Mafia. Sarah into bottom S at 87, which is quicker than Malcolm. This is the Formula Junior Lotus 2022. And she records a 32.14, so she's been beaten Malcolm by 14/10 of a second. Here's Steve Palmer in the classic Lotus 51, the Formula Ford Lotus 51. There was one occasion at the Earls Court Motor Show when Colin Chapman produced one of these with lights and mud guards as qualified, registered it as a road car. And I don't think he seriously wanted to sell any, but Dennis Jenkinson, the famous journalist, borrowed it one Christmas time and did a road test of it. Steve Palmer has finished with a 33.8. Now it's Steve Harris. No, it's not. It's David Giddon in this lovely little Lotus 23B. The car that was a sensation at the 1,000-kilometer race at the Nürburgring in 1963, when Jim Clark came round at the end of the first lap, way ahead of the works Ferraris, Maseratis, Lancias. They couldn't believe how quick this little Lotus was. That doesn't look like an Austin Mini on the hill to me, but I could be wrong. David Giddon's time in the 23B, 33.52. So it's Steve Harris, but I don't think he's in a Mini. But he's followed by something that describes itself as a Mini, the Maguire Mini Cooper of Derek Kessel. I think it might have mini door handles and possibly even a mini windscreen, but otherwise It's a pure racing car on a space frame. And a number of these minis were modified, the engine was modified to have the BMW motorcycle cylinder head. But Derek nevertheless records a 33.84, and we're into Ferraris. This lovely Ferrari 458 Spider of Paul Booth kicks off the Ferrari Championship class Pirelli Ferrari Hill Climb Championship. 458 Spider. Spider means soft top. I don't know why the Italians used the word spider. I think it meant speeder, but all their soft top cars are called spiders. Nothing to do with arachne, whatever they are, spiders. Anyway, Paul, 36.71. Tony Atwood in this venerable but pretty Dino 246 that the company never called a Ferrari. They always called it a Dino in honor of Enzo Ferrari's son Dino, who sadly died very young. But the 246 GT has the V6 engine in the back. It's gloriously pretty. By modern standards, it's not a very quick car. I mean, it easily will be outrun by a modern hot hatch, but that doesn't stop it being beautiful and desirable. 40.97 for the Dino. Paul Booth, 36.71. Now Mark Wibberley in the Ferrari 360 Spider. Earlier, V8 rear-engined Ferrari. Making those lovely noises, revving to about 8,500 revs. And the 355 and 360 were the successors to the car that Pauline Goodwin has got on the line, the 328 Ferrari, which was the first, well, the 308 and the 328 were the first V8 rear-engine Ferraris. And they gradually got prettier and faster. The only mishap in a way was the 348 that in standard form originally had terrible road holding and was succeeded by the 355, which looked similar but had much nicer handling. Pauline's into bottom S at 75. Time for Mark Wibberley, 38.36, and Pauline is followed by John in this lovely short wheelbase, 3-litre short wheelbase 250 SWB, the predecessor to the fabulous Ferrari GTO, and the original ones of these are worth lots and lots and lots of money, but we won't talk values. The value for John is that he's got a lovely car to go hill climbing in. Pauline records a 38.10. But listen to the glorious sound of this 3-litre V12. Not hanging around, 64 into bottom S. We can drool over this car in the paddock. Last car in the Ferrari gang is the Dino 308 GT4. John Goodwin records a 40.74, but here's the Dino 308 in the hands of Ewan Atwood. This was I think the only V8 rear-engine Ferrari with a body designed by Bertone. Maybe not as pretty as the flowing lines of the 308, 328, but it had two dinky little seats in the back, so if you had small kids, it really was the Ferrari to buy if you weren't going to go for a full V12 front-engined one. Ian records a 41.05. Finlay McIntosh brought the Cooper with its 500cc Jap motorcycle engine up to the start line, but sadly has been wheeled away. Now, if it's just a broken chain, that's a fairly rapid repair, but he introduces to us the class for the 500 Owners Association, drivers of the Formula 3 500cc racing cars. We'll talk about that when that class and the development of these Coopers and the 500cc cars when we have a moment. But he was going to run in a different batch, so presumably that's a shared car. Yes, Finlay McIntosh will be sharing with Max McIntosh in this Cooper. So Max will be hoping, like anything, that the Finlay and together they can fix the car. In the meantime, on the line is Malcolm Redgwell in a Renault Clio 182, alone in Class WAM, which is the Trident Engineering Welsh Sprint and Hill Climb Championship. So Malcolm will earn points in that championship through not having any competition at all. Clio, 182 horsepower. It makes a brilliant hot hatch for the road, quick enough. They've progressively got quicker and quicker from the first of the Clio Sports, but the early ones are nice to drive as well. And Malcolm reaches the top just over 40 seconds with a finishing speed of 74. Those cars will come down the hill, give them a nice wave as they come down, particularly Sarah Thorne in the blue Lotus 22. Give her a particular wave because she yesterday won the Paul Matty Lotus Championship. Good for her. Well done, Sarah. Before they come up the hill, let me just talk a little bit about the history of the 500cc Formula 3, which was introduced in about 1946 by the Bristol Car Club down in the southwest of the country to give young men who'd really either been in the war or had avoided war service a bit of excitement without the enormous cost of motor racing in something like an ERA. They developed a formula for racing cars, single-seat racing cars powered by 500cc motorcycle engines, chain drive, and it took off like a rocket. There were some weird and wonderful specials built down in the West Country, but then John Cooper and his father Charles made their first Cooper Formula 3 car by chopping two Fiat Topolino, the little Fiat 500 chassis, in half and welding them back to back to produce a little racing car with transverse leaf spring suspension both ends. They popped a Jap engine in it, and that was the first Cooper, and that was the start of a dynasty that ended up with them winning the Formula One World Championship with a Cooper in the hands of Jack Brabham. And following Cooper, all sorts of other little companies sprang up making 500cc racing cars. There are some examples of which we've got here today, particularly the Star Ride, built in London, the Iota. But Cooper really was the main producer of these cars. And the racing was fast and furious. The cars weren't terribly expensive. Lots of people invested in them, and they raced. And of course, they all had very similar power and performance, so the racing was nip and tuck. We've got a couple of messages. Great to be able to see what's happening on the hill from the courtyard bar. Well, what could be better? I don't know how much you can see from the courtyard bar, but maybe there's a screen in there. You could power your Cooper or your 500cc Formula 3 car with, most of them had either Jap or Norton engines. Norton was a more sophisticated engine and more powerful, but a bit heavier. So it tended to be the Norton engines that you raced on the circuits and a Jap in the hills. And a couple of the cars we've got here today have the Norton engines, the rest have the Jap. Andy Johnson, great coverage again today. We were there competing yesterday in our spinning MX-5. We saw you, it was harmless, but he says, have a great afternoon, everyone. I'm sure we will. Nigel Parsons enjoying the live feed. Wish I was there. Unfortunately stuck in Worcester Hospital. Well, that's tough luck, Nigel. And as Eddie says, get well soon. Here we go. Action on the hill. Car on the start line. It's a Cooper. And it's Max McIntosh. So that's the good news, that the car that Finlay brought to the start line has been fixed. Cooper with a Jap engine. It's a fairly late one. I would say it's a Mark 8. Cooper produced a new car, a new model every year with slight improvements, so that customers kept coming back. But Max going well, and records a 69 into bottom S, which is very quick for a 500. On the line, or off the line, a different engine note, because this Mark 5 of Andrew Rayner has got the Norton engine. So a bit more power. The classic, what's called the double knocker Norton engine, which effectively means twin overhead camshafts, well, and hairpin valve springs, which tended to cause a certain amount of trouble. Andrew Rayner, 41.44, Max McIntosh, 38.46, that's a very good time. Here's Jan Nitsch in his beautifully presented, as always, Star Ride, built in London by Mr. Erskine, again with the Norton engine, and Jan both hill climbs and races this car. It's the ultimate, what they call cab forward, in other words, with the driver right at the front of the car with his legs dangling ahead of the front suspension, which means you have to get it pretty sideways before you realise you're spinning. 40.13 for Jan. He's followed by Mike Wood in another small manufacturer of these cars. Iota built a few dozen Formula 500, Formula 3 cars. But safely and neatly through the S's. 66 S approach was the same as Andrew Rayner, and Mike finishes with a 41.49. He's followed by Vic Dean in the Mark 9, which seems to be having a bit of a struggle. Maybe it's in too high a gear. Mark 9 from about 1956. Only 33 into S's. There's something not quite right mechanically. Maybe he's stuck in a higher gear than he wants to be. Let's hope, A, that he gets to the top of the hill, which I think he will, and B, that he can fix it for a second run later this afternoon. A fantastic car came to the start line. Sadly, it's been moved away. It's Alistair Howell's angled iron special that really typifies the home-built cars originally produced for the 500cc Formula 3. And this one even has a 250cc engine, but doesn't appear to want to play. And then we had the 1100cc Coopers with the 1100cc Jap V twin in the back that were extremely effective both on the circuits and in hill climbs. David Good and Peter Bosch, the Boscher Jones brothers, had enormous success with 1100cc Cooper Japs on hill climbing, and Sterling Moss even raced a Cooper Jap 1100 in various Grand Prix, in the Brussels Grand Prix, before he was a works driver for HWM. They're very, very rapid cars. This is Charles Reynolds, who's campaigned this one for some time, but 72 into bottom S. I'm afraid we're missing Malcolm Bell in his Mark 10 V-twin. It's gone home hors de combat, as they say, not working. Time for Charles Reynolds, 37.17. And we've got two runners in the Petro-Canada Lubricants Porsche Club Speed Championship with Pirelli. First of which is Geraint Evans in this lovely Porsche Carrera. Pirelli sponsor, well, we know they sponsor the Ferraris and they also sponsor the Porsche Speed Championship. And Geraint has a 3-litre, well, it's a 3.6-litre Porsche Carrera. Very powerful, very effective, 35.07. Howard Cressy has the Cayman with the 3.4-litre flat 6 mid-engine. And then we've got three more runners in the Trident Engineering Welsh Sprint and Hill Climb Championship to follow. The first of which, Bob Penrose, is on the line in the OMS. But let's just watch Howard Cressy in the Cayman finishing his run. Well, Penrose has taken off. He's heading for crossing. Meanwhile, Howard Cressy in the Cayman, 39.87. He'll be happy to be under the 40 mark. Here's Bob Penrose in the OMS. There must be a relationship between Robert Penrose, who we saw earlier, and Bob Penrose in this car. Three gear changes from top S to finish, 35.08. Daniel Redgwell again, competing in the Welsh Sprint and Hill Climb Championship. Sharing the car, I think, with Malcolm, who's also in the, he's also in this championship. So I don't know if they're father and son or brothers, but they're having fun in their Clio 182. And he's followed by Carol Nichols, just leaving the line in the Nike single-seater, constructed by her father, Ken Nichols, down in Devon. He built hundreds of race car chassis, not only for his own mark, which was Nike, but also for Lotus, for Brabham, for others. And indeed, Carol told me he was actually building a chassis when he sadly died a couple of years ago. She was always determined to compete in one of her dad's cars, or one of the cars made by her father, and this is in the Nike single-seater. So well done, Carol. She records a 39.59. So that's the end of our first runs. Cars turn round, come back down, and then we do it all over again, and then we conclude the year's competition with our top 10 runoff. Just for the third time, I'll mention the Golf illegally parked CY11 ETR. Please, if you haven't already done so, please move it and please get checked at the gate for COVID-19. John Crosdale, he messages from across the pond, which the pond being the Atlantic Ocean. So John, I don't know where you are, but good morning to you, and good of you to be watching us. Nigel Elliott, who should be here in TR7, the fearsome TR7. Ever enjoying watching the racing in my back brace. Well, that doesn't sound good, Nigel. Sorry about that. Wish you were here. Well, I wish you were. Best wishes to everyone. Get well soon. Ian Holmes, as much as I love the high-tech single-seaters, these 500cc Formula 3s are the best. Well, I used to bicycle from school to Brands Hatch to watch them racing, and the racing was fantastic. And of course, they were the nursery, if you like, for some Formula One Grand Prix drivers. Sterling Moss being one of them, Peter Collins being another, little Lewis Evans, Van Wall, works driver, sadly killed in the Morocco Grand Prix in 1958. Stuart Lewis Evans and his father raced together in Formula 3. Jason Fenley again, checking in from Texas again. Fantastic coverage. Good morning, Jason. Hope everything's okay in Texas. So Jack Brabham came over from Australia to having had a successful racing career in Australia, but as a young man he came over to England. Cooper invited him to race for them, so he turned up at the factory and met Charles Cooper and said, "Hello, Charles, so where's my car?" And Charles pointed at a pile of tubes on the shelf and said, "Well, there's the tubes, you make it." And Jack, of course, did. And the rest was history. A terrific success in Formula One for Jack Brabham, with various marks of Cooper, with the Climax engine in the back, 2.5 and 1.5 litres, and a dynasty really started, the Brabham dynasty. And indeed, we've now got the Brabham car, the racing car, supercar, if you like, which is, I believe, selling well. And Brabham have just introduced the road version of the Brabham. What is it? Brabham 69, is it? Someone will put me right. But in the meantime, here we go again with our first car up the hill. Alan Broome again in the little Toyota MR2. You don't see many of the original Series 1 MR2s. Rather square cut with a little 1600 engine in the middle. But funnily enough, I saw one on the road yesterday in beautiful condition. Then there was the Mark II, which was slightly more swoopy. It had a 2-litre engine, not so popular. And then a few years ago, out came the Mark III, this one, for which you can get a hardtop. You can get one with automatic gears, but you can't get one with much luggage space. Alan, 41.89, followed by John McQuillan in the 1275 Cooper S. And Alan's time in the Toyota, 41.89. So we've got a couple of Minis. Mentioning earlier how tiny they are. We think that the BMW Mini is pretty small, but the original Mini was minute, with its little 10-inch wheels, and Dunlop made special tires for them. And of course, inevitably, because the Mini had fabulous road holding, John does a 48.13, pretty soon people were racing them, and they found that the wheels weren't strong enough. And so when the Cooper S came out, it was fitted with much stronger wheels. Do you remember the disc wheels with ventilation holes in them? And a lovely young woman called Christabel Carlyle decided to race a Mini and turned up at Brands Hatch for her first race, and was asking the lads, you know, give me some tricks of the trade, what do I do? And they said, oh, don't worry, pedal to the metal all the way around, don't lift for any corners. And of course they were pulling her leg, but she didn't realize and obeyed them, promptly won the race. Chris Buffton has been up in the Citroen Saxo, he's just about to finish. And he's followed by Adrian Reed in the bright yellow Elise. Chris does a 43.21, and Christabel Carlyle, incidentally, married into the aristocracy, so she's lady something or other. But she was a delightful person. So we got a number of Elises, and we've got, as always, a number of MX-5s. Here comes Sepp Cartwright in his. Meanwhile, Adrian Reed in the Elise has scored a 36.23, 82 both into bottom S and over the line. Sept 69 into bottom S. Away from the start comes James Evans, who's had an incident-filled day. He had a spin at top S in practice and damaged the front of the car, but he and his team worked like crazy to make the car okay past the scrutineers for a first and second competition run, and here it is again. So well done, James, for perseverance. Time for Adrian Reed, 36.23. James Evans heads for the finishing line, 41.13, and he's followed by the MGF of Steve Jackman. When did the MGF first come out? Ed will tell me, but in the mid-90s, or maybe earlier, with the K-Series engine mid-mounted, but nevertheless quite a good sized luggage boot behind. Steve Jackman has finished with a 37.71, and here's Anna-May Furness with the 106 Peugeot GTI. And Anna-May is quickly into bottom S, heavy braking, tyre squealing at 80 miles an hour. She's going well. And David Meek has taken off, as you can see on the little screen, in the white MX-5, 2-litre engine, lots of power. Anna-May records 36.82, which is a very good time for the little 106. Here's David Meek going into bottom S at 72, heavy braking again, avoids the dragon's teeth. Does he avoid the drain cover? Yes, he does. Takes a nice line through the top S and heads for the finish. He's followed by James Lovell in a 197 horsepower Renault Clio Sport. David Meek has finished in the MX-5 with a 39.27. Here's James Lovell. Neat and tidy, no dramas. But Tony Adams has taken off in his powerful 1800cc Lotus Elise. Going really quickly, sounding crisp, and 86 into bottom S. That means there's plenty of power there. It's a Mark II Elise bodywork. Dean Cubitt an MX-5 with lots of stickers. It's obviously had quite a lot of racing experience. 2-litre engine, here he is. Rounds crossing and into bottom S. In the meantime, Tony Adams' time, 34.84 in the Elise. Dean Cubitt top S, Paul Howard off the start in another MGF. Here he is, heading into crossing, Paul Howard. Meanwhile, Dean Cubitt has finished with a 37.09 in the black Mazda. We've got a Cayman on the line, looking resplendent. It's a fairly modern one with the 3.4 engine, bit of wheel spin off the line, but nevertheless 2.72. Paul Howard has finished in the MGF with a 40.92. Here's the Cayman. And we'll watch the Audi TT on the line, Graham Godfrey's, because with four-wheel drive, they tend to be very smartly off the line. Indeed, it's a 2.23, which is rapid for a road car. The Cayman heads for the finish and records a time of 37.51, speed 88. Audi TT Mark 1 with the original, much admired, very simple bodywork, sort of in the typical German Bauhaus style. The very early ones got a reputation for rather scary handling on the limit, and they had to quickly modify the suspension, but soon sorted it out. Meanwhile, John Fordy takes off in the Carrera, Graham Godfrey in the Audi 36.31. John Fordy, I bet he goes classic rallying in this car. I would. Look at all the lights on the front, terrific. I don't want to be critical, but not many people spell Porsche Boxster right, do they? They forget that there's an X in the middle there, an S in the middle there. Anyway, Rod Fisher in the Porsche Boxster takes off from the line. In the meantime, John Fordy records 37.73. It's a funny name, Boxster, isn't it? Completely meaningless, but maybe to Porsche it means something. But it has been a great success. Legendary flat 6 engine. I think they made a mistake when they introduced the flat 4 engine. Although it was quicker and more economical, it didn't make the right noise, and lots of people didn't like it. So Porsche quickly came back out with a 6-cylinder one. Rod Fisher records 37.22. Phil James is with us in the Cayman, and Roy Stanley has taken off in the ferocious Evo 5 RS, producing masses of power. Roy, frequently the quickest saloon car up here. This has got masses of power. He's an extremely skillful driver. Sadly, we haven't seen him competing much in recent years, so it's great that Roy's brought it out for this final meeting. Phil James, time 35.84. And Roy's done a 31.75, 75. A 106 over the line. Here's the Alfa Romeo GT. I had the diesel version of this, but with the famous V6 3.2 Busso engine, lovely engine. It drinks a bit more, but makes the right noises and goes very quickly. And lots of people liked the Brera, which is a very pretty car, but to many people the GT in a way was better because it was much lighter. It also had more room in the back. So Howard, 40.79 in a very much road version, road level Alfa Romeo. Bruce Bosley, Caterham Sport, number 38. He's the only car in Class B1, so he'll win that class. He could say, I've been a class winner at Shelsley. Specialist production cars up to 1700cc, and he of course is in the Caterham Supersport. Howard Davis in the Alfa, 40.79. Here's the Aston again in the hands of Andrew Fraser. New car for them this year. They've been working for 3 years building it up from an original GT4 damaged body that they acquired from ProDrive. The rest has been done by themselves. 4.3 litre V8 Aston engine. It's going to be supercharged next year. Sequential gearbox, transaxle at the back. And it's quick, isn't it? 33.61, speed 96. As is this little Fisher Fury of Graham Manton. Fishers came in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but I think the most popular was the Fury. And Graham in the Fury, furious climb of 36.45. No one on the start line, flags are out, so batch comes down, gives me a chance to have a look at some messages. Jason in Texas, I would love to bring my Corvette over and take it up the hill. Has a Corvette ever been up the course? Don't know if one has competed, says Retro Rides, but definitely had one up Shelsley at our event, Retro Rides event, but it was untimed. It's a big car for a narrow hill, but with plenty of power, you'd have a lot of fun, Jason. Come and try it. Justin Evans, I miss John Moody commentating. Well, John is here, and he does his share of commentating. And indeed, his son Toby is currently, well, they've just finished, haven't they? The Le Mans 24-hour race has just finished, and Toby has been busy the whole 24 hours, or more than 24 hours, reporting from the pit lane, interviewing drivers, which is not an easy thing to do, because drivers, when they finish their stint, are only too happy to escape out the back and have a bit of shut-eye in the caravan. But Toby stops them from escaping and interviews them. And of course, you can hardly hear what they are saying, because the cars are whizzing past down the finishing straight all the time. But I'm sure Toby's been very successful at Le Mans. Justin Evans is asking whether Dave Parr still competes. Well, he does. He competed. He was at Prescott the other day in his Anglia and regularly competes in his Sierra Cosworth. We also learned that Christabel Carlisle was on Radio 4 a little while ago. Retro Rides tells us a fascinating person. Yeah, indeed, with a fascinating motor racing history. She was like a rocket. She arrived, won things, and then disappeared, gave up racing forever. Chris Lee tells us that the sight and sound of a full grid of Formula 500s on the Longridge racing circuit in the 70s was something to behold. I bet it was. Where's the Longridge circuit? Is that in Australia? Someone will tell us. Richard Priest tells us, for the Ferrari class, if you add our performance equalizing percentage, then after run one, Pauline Goodwin lies in first place, with Anthony Atwood second and Paul Booth in third. Thank you for that, Richard. We don't often get results messaged to us. So some nice messages. Last meeting we had a message from, I can't remember his name, he was in on an oil tanker off the coast of Western Australia, so I hope he wasn't meant to be steering the oil tanker, but he was watching Shelsley instead. Nothing to do with Shelsley, but interestingly, I was walking in Northamptonshire with my wife the other day at a village called Helidon. We didn't realise that under our feet was a great long railway tunnel from the Great Central Railway, which is straight and level for 3 kilometres. It's being turned into the world's largest aerodynamic testing facility, to which people could take their cars and run at least 2 miles straight and level, which gives you much more accurate readings than a rolling road. And it's a really interesting development for an unused or disused railway tunnel, and online lots of information about it. But in the meantime, off we go with this well-known Peugeot 205, driven by all sorts of famous hill climbers, but now by Darren Bolster. It's been developed to produce masses of power and masses of speed, as you can see, by the fact that it goes into S approach at 93. Handles well because there's virtually no suspension movement. It's as light as you can possibly make a 205, and Darren 31.81 is very quick indeed for a saloon car. He's followed by Dave Moore in the Mark II Escort in Group 4 trim. And we all remember the great Roger Clark, great rally success in Ford Escorts. And indeed it was an Escort that won the London to Mexico rally, hence the model that was called the Escort Mexico. So Dave Moore over the line, 37.76, and Tim Painter brings the Aston Martin again to the line. It was great talking to the pair of them about the development of this car. It's very light, it's got carbon fiber doors, boot lid, getting as much of the weight off as possible. It's about 100 kilos lighter than the regular GT4 circuit racing Aston. And I repeat that they're planning to put a supercharger on it and increase the power output from 500 to getting on for 600 horsepower. So we look forward to seeing that on the hills next year, which I'm sure we will. In the meantime, we enjoy the lovely V8 sound of the 4.3 litre Aston Martin engine. Sequential gearbox at the back, which Tim tells me is much faster than the previous standard GT4 semi-automatic box. That's a good time by Tim, 33.99. He's followed by this fearsome 2.6 litre Vauxhall Chevette in the hands of Gary Morgan. Chevette was a reasonably successful Vauxhall road car, but made a good circuit car. And rallying, of course, lots of them were rallied. We've seen this car before many, many times. It's Andy Norris in the supercharged 3.3 litre Porsche Carrera. We've got a time for Tim Painter, I think I gave you 33.99. Andy into bottom S at 90. And through the S sector at 9.91, which in a Porsche is pretty quick. Remember I said under 8 seconds through the S sector. Now here's our record-holding Audi S4, holds the C3 record. Fearsome Audi S4. Roger hasn't been here with this car, I think, for getting on for 6 years. It's incredibly quick. 94 into bottom S, but well over 100 over the finishing line. Four-wheel drive, plenty of power, plenty of speed. 30.03, 113 over the line. Here's this much modified Peugeot 106 GTI in the hands of Oliver Wright, sharing the car. '83 into bottom S. So these will be the getting on to the last runners in this batch. So these are the double-driven cars in batch 2. Oliver Wright, 34.88. He's followed by Paul Jones in this powerful Elise, 726. Tony Adams drove this car before, but Paul Jones records in it 34.11. Here's Phil Cook again. Phil in this super lightweight cage room. Followed by Graham Frankland in his, with the K-Series engine. Phil, 30.89. Told you he was quick. 104 over the line is rapid for a Caterham. Here's Graham Franklin into bottom S at 85, but then seemed to slow a bit. Might have cost him a bit of time. Yeah, it cost him quite a lot. 35.41 over the line for Graham. John Goodred's was a fraction faster first run in the 32s, if I remember right, as I think was John Bradshaw, but we'll see. John Bradshaw's off the line. Good start of 2.29. John heads for the finish, and it's a 33.48. I think John Bradshaw might be quicker than that, but don't take my word for it. But 96 into bottom S is quick. Wow, I was right. It is quick. 30.26. 30.26 actually beats Phil Cook, which is going well. Jerry Neary in his version with the Honda Blackbird engine follows Craig Spooner around top S. Craig won't be so quick, it'll be a 34 or so. 33.5. Here's Jerry Neary. It's only a 1200cc engine. Reflected in the 74S approach speed. Here's Becky Manton off the line, sharing the Fisher Fury. Meanwhile, Jerry records a 36.57. Becky into the kink, into the speed trap at S's, 78 miles an hour. Then watch the Fiat off the line, Ian Medcalf. Little Fiat scuttles off the line. The acceleration is just phenomenal with its 1 litre Swift Tune mini engine in the back. It's called a Fiat 500, but it isn't really, although Fiat, I'm sure, would adopt it proudly because it's so quick. Neat and tidy, tiny car, threads it through the S's. And 34.07. Ian will be pleased with that. Here's Andrew Burt in the Mark II Malloch, of which we're informed there's a similar example in the Channel Islands, but this I think is the only one on the mainland. Andrew found it in Sweden. It had been used sprinting and racing in Sweden, brought it back, refettled it, fitted a Vauxhall engine, and here it is, going well. The time for Andrew is a 33.03. David Bickley in the Radical. You can buy Radicals as a road car, not supremely comfortable, but good fun on the road. And David's quickly into bottom S at 92. It's a bit like Ginetta Racing. It's so competitive. It's a nursery for future stars of Formula Racing. 31.07 for David Bickley. Here's the famous Malloch in the hands of Robin Nicholson, the Mark XX Malloch. Fettled and prepared by and driven by our sadly late Kim Johnson, for whom we had, before we started live streaming, we had a 1 minute silence. Kim, Robin records a 31.47. Here's the little Lapel Genesis that I said must be here for the first time, but Eddie puts me right. He says it's been here 5 times already this year. But Neville's going well. It's got a 1 litre Honda, presumably a bike engine in the back. No dramas, and heads for the finishing line. On the line, Nigel Pitt in the OMS with the 1100cc engine that he is sharing. In the up to 1100cc racing car class, that's quick, into Kennel, 2.15 off the line. He's going well. And almost 198 into bottom S. They're so light, they're so nimble, the road holding is fantastic. And you've got enough power to take you up the hill in 29.44. Hold on to your hats, here's Alan Warburton again. Are we going to see Alan in the 24s? I wouldn't be a little bit surprised. Unlike most bike engine cars, this has the engine fore and aft in the center of the frame, in center of the tub, with a shaft drive to a Quaife differential and the back axle. Very advanced aerodynamics, 118 into bottom S. Two gear changes between top S and the finishing line. No, it's a 25.77. What can Lindsay do in the DJ Fast Storm? Well, she's one of the quickest over the finishing line, 139 last time. 2:05 for the start. And into the bottom S at 106. Sometimes it's advantageous to get your braking in early, get sorted out for bottom S without recording a massively quick time. But now look at the finishing speed. Poof, 140. How about that? So Lindsay's time was a 26.86. I think she'll be in the top 10. Meantime, our last runner in this batch is Ken Williamson in the MGA. He's the only runner in the pre-75 classic saloons and sports cars, I think. No, there are some more at the end of the later in the next batch. So he's sharing the car with Ted Elvis. 42.62. They'll come back down. Yeah, I was mentioning the railway tunnel under Catesby, the village of Catesby in Northamptonshire, because that's going to be a terrific advantage for both, well, for cars, bikes, motorcycles, to help develop the aerodynamics in the world's largest aerodynamic testing facility, a railway tunnel that's nearly 3 kilometers. Well, it's long, but the part that they're going to use is 3 kilometers that's dead straight and pretty much dead flat as well. And it's a big railway tunnel. It was the Great Central Railway, which was tunneled because the local landowner who lived on the top of the hill didn't want trains to be visible from his house in the mid-19th century. So he said, no, if you want to come this way, you've got to build a tunnel. So they did. They built this huge tunnel in Northamptonshire, and a lot of work is going on, putting a nice surface, putting lighting in it, putting a turntable at each end, and a building at the start where you can prepare your vehicle, and around it at the start of the tunnel, the area at the start of the tunnel, which was the old railway station, they're building a number of units to house high-tech industries connected with the work that will be going on in the tunnel. So if you're in the Helidon, Catesby area, you won't see much of the tunnel, but certainly you can see the entrance to it at the southern, at the southern end of the tunnel. But look online, Catesby Railway Tunnel, you'll get lots of information. They're working hard. I think they're planning to have it open and ready for business next year. But it's a big investment, and it's rather good to see that someone is making very productive use of a disused railway tunnel. If you walk or drive between the villages of Helidon and Catesby, you can see the ventilation shafts from the tunnel, a line of them poking up through into the fresh air. Ashley Bing messages us, is the public allowed to go down to the paddock to see the cars up close? Well, Ashley, unfortunately, under the current circumstances, when we've got two bubbles, a paddock bubble and a spectator bubble, you can't. But in a normal year, yes, anybody who comes to Shelsley is welcome to come into the paddock and have a close look at the cars. Now, what have we got? We've got the rest of our cars in batch 3. So I think this will be Robert Penrose. It is indeed in the carbon fibre tubbed OMS CF04. Nice neat start, 2.48 is okay. Little bit of a lift into Kennel. I think Robert hasn't competed here very much, so he's gradually getting the hang of it. If you've never driven Shelsley, it's a pretty daunting thing to do for the first few times. It's a very fast hill, as you can see by the bottom S speeds and the finishing speeds, and it is a certain amount of gritting your teeth and going. And if it's your first time in a single seater, you can't believe how much grip and how much road holding you get in a single seater. Robert, his time 37.34. Here's Clive Austin again. Clive has got a lovely collection of cars, including a beautifully restored E-Type that has just been delivered to Clive. Absolutely immaculate and lovely. It's an early one. Exactly 100 miles an hour into bottom S. That's 7 or so mph slower than his first run. But he's through the S's at 8.1. That's quick. 27.64 is the time. Probably will get him into the top 10. In the meantime, here's Stuart Bickley in the 1100cc Jedi. Jedi, big competition for OMS, but Jedi have always concentrated on the small engine classes, 500, 600 and 1100. Whereas OMS, as you can see from Trevor Wilson's car, 3.2 litres. Time for Stuart, 26.9. Slight change of pace with the 1984 Van Diemen Formula Ford car. Was it Ron Toronak who led Van Diemen? No, I don't think it was. But oh, a neat and tidy little spin at bottom S, which means that Sarah Bosworth will be red flagged and probably turned round. She quickly stops, and there's a space at the kink to turn her around and bring her back down. But Max Hawkes had a neat and tidy little spin at bottom S, no damage whatsoever. He will probably go into the parking area at bottom S, and can probably help himself to an ice cream while he's there. Can't see where Sarah is, but on the screen we get a quick repeat of Max's little spin. No harm done whatsoever. That's how you find the limit, as Gilles Villeneuve always used to say. If you ain't spinning, you ain't trying. Is Sarah back already in the double drive paddock? No, I don't think so. She'll be on her way down the hill. So a small pause while we get Max back down. He won't, unfortunately, get another run. The rule is that if your rear wheels, you can have a false start, but if your rear wheels pass the finishing line, the start line, you don't get a rerun. And we saw, was it June Matty, having a bit of a false start, but luckily she only went forward a couple of inches, and so she was able to restart. I think we still got to push Sarah Bosworth's car down the hill. Here she comes, back down round Kennel. Yeah, I was on the point of talking about the two cottages at the bottom of the hill opposite the start, which are now holiday lets as of yesterday. They've both been beautifully refurbished and refurnished, and they look, I've seen the photographs, they look lovely. So a lovely place to have a weekend. And details will be on the Shelsley website of how you can book, where you go to book a stay in the cottages at Shelsley. Up to you whether you choose a hill climbing weekend, in which case it'll be a bit noisy, or a peaceful one without race cars. Here's Claire Lightwood sharing with, who's she sharing with? In the 1100 OMS. Yeah, sharing, of course, with Nigel Pitt. And I think Claire, again, is a relative newcomer to Shelsley. Sarah gets her second run. She's on her way. Claire finishes with a 36.1. Here's Sarah in another Van Diemen, 1 year younger than Max is. But again, similar layout, wide track, narrow bodywork, you squeeze yourself in. But Formula Ford doesn't seem to be quite as popular as it used to be. It used to be a fantastic nursery ground for future Grand Prix stars. And the championship every year at Brands Hatch was a huge occasion. Here's Steve Morgan in the Empire Evo. Only out for the second time this year, so he's in a way had to relearn it. Tells me he found it scary fast when he first went out. But he records a 27.84. Pretty soon after these second runs, I'll be able to tell you who is going to feature in the runoff again of the meeting. Andrew Short, Steve Morgan, 27.84. Yeah, we mentioned that. Andrew Short, very rapid S approach in this little car, 103. Yeah, he'll be happy. 28.32 is a good time. What can Rob Anscombe do in the 1340cc OMS Hornet? These cars have all got Hayabusa engines. 3 gear changes between the top S and the finish. 29.09 for Rob. Is this Alan Warburton? I have a feeling it should be David, because we saw Alan just a few minutes ago. 1.96 off the start line. $123 bottom S. I think this is David. $24.6 for David Warburton. Great run. 118 over the finishing line, but 123 into bottom S. Paul Hames with another GR59. This different technology, turbocharged 1300cc engine, same very lightweight car, same amount of downforce. Launch control 2.14 for 64 feet. For 127 as approach, 133 over the line. That's a fantastic speed for a 1300. Certainly 24.55. Certainly one of the top qualifiers in the runoff. In the meantime, Trevor Willis. Trevor did 133 into bottom S yesterday. This morning, early this afternoon, not quite so great. Brilliant driver, PowerTech engine with enough power. 133 again, Trevor, fantastic. Ah, 23.3, 135. Brilliant run by Trevor Willis. 135 over the line. Now then, what can Alex do? DJ Firestorm. That's quick, and that's even quicker, and 134 is quicker still into bottom S. Incredible. 23.14. So fractionally quicker than Trevor, but not into the 22s. Wow, we draw breath and we watch James Thacker in this lovely Frog Eye Sprite with its non-standard hard top. The original Sprite had, I think, a 990cc 1-litre engine that a lot of the ones that compete have had the engine bored out, or a new engine. This one, 1330cc. James Thacker heads for the finish. He's followed by Ted Elwis. We saw this car. It has a Ken Williamson slightly earlier. Always immaculate. Lovely MGA that Ted has competed. 20 years at least, I would say. James Thacker, 38.43. Speed 78 in the Frog Eye. That's quick, 78 in a Frog Eye over the line. He's followed by Paul DeVille in the Sprite. Ted Elwis has finished with a 40.4. Here's Paul in the Mark II Sprite. And then last runner in this class, Clive Buffy, in the Series 4 Lotus Elan drop head. Paul heads for the finish and records a 46.09. These are all pre-75 saloons and sports cars, as I'm sure you know. Should be the end of a batch. It must be, because the red flags are out. Clive finishes his run with a 41.57. We've had another message from Arnold Zottler in Austria, in Styria. Hello from Austria. Grüß Gott, Arnold. Wie geht es Ihnen? Mark Dauncey tells us that Sean Gould went into S approach at 145 miles an hour last Saturday. That must be a record. And speeds over the finishing line are higher than that. Yeah, I didn't think I was right in saying Ron Tornak started Van Diemen. He started Ralt, of course. Andrew Henwood says someone needs to look into advertising this better. Yep. Well, I think you're probably right, Andrew. The question will be whether we continue live streaming our meetings when things are back to normal and we've got our usual big crowd. I think it would be great if we could, and indeed it needs to be publicized as much as possible on Facebook. Obviously there's no point in spending a lot of money advertising the live stream, but certainly advising people. We had about 3,000 people on watching the live stream yesterday, which is pretty good, but the second meeting, it was something like 9,000. I think the advantage was that it was frequently mentioned on Facebook for a good week before the event. When I first came to compete at Shelsley, coming down the hill, you didn't need to wear a crash helmet, and it was lovely. Bit of breath of fresh air. You could wave to your friends, they could wave back to you, and if you're spectating, you see what the drivers actually look like. But 20 or so years ago, maybe a bit more than that, the powers that be, in their wisdom, decreed that coming down the hill, you had to wear your crash helmet as well. Similarly, in the early days, we didn't have silencers, and it was a very noisy business. And in about 1987, I think, it was mandated that we should all run silencers and have a noise test with a set decibel limit. And the inhabitants of the Team Valley no doubt were pleased that the cars were quieter, and indeed it made it a much more pleasant experience. It really was too noisy, particularly with the big V8s. Here we go again, and we go again with Bryony Searle in the Alfa Mark 7. What more is there to say about this pretty little car? Wasn't built in quite such large numbers as the Lotus 23, but had a lot of success, particularly in the United States. Bryony, famous for having her ears on her helmet, lost one at the last meeting, going through the S's, and luckily the marshals found it and picked it up and gave it back to her. scrutineers were worried that it was screwed into the helmet, which of course would damage the helmet. But of course, Bryony's got more sense than that. It's stuck on with a suction pad. Bryony will finish very shortly, and it's a 34.14, followed by Bill Drysdale, the old codger himself, in the self-built Porsche 904, which sounds lovely now that it's got a proper six-cylinder Porsche 911 engine and a 911 gearbox. And people are actually approaching Bill to sell them Porsche 904 bodywork, which of course he's got the molds, so he can do that. Brian Meddings in the Lotus 35. Really interesting to have a couple of Lotus 35s. There are 3 on the hills in all. Paul Matty's got one as well, which was here yesterday. All of them now fitted with the Lotus Ring twin cam engine. And Brian finishes with a 34.31. Here's the sister car in the hands of Malcolm Thorne, 1600 rather than 1700. And Malcolm, as I said earlier, overall winner at the Chateau Empney hill climb last year, which was a lovely event. It really was a treat. Only ran for 4 or 5 years. Sadly, the Spollen family had to pull the plug because financially it just was too expensive. Here's Malcolm heading for the finish. 33.32. He's been chased by Sarah. She's quicker off the line, 2.15. Similar engine, similar power. So although it started life as a Formula Junior and Malcolm started life as a Formula 2, the performance of both cars is pretty similar. 86 into bottom S compared with Malcolm's 82. And she records a 32.42, so she's quicker than Malcolm. He will say that it's because she's lighter, which I suppose might be true. Steve Palmer in a Formula Ford Lotus 51 into the S's. No dramas over the line. Steve records a 33.8, but 95 over the line in a Lotus 51 is great going. Here's one of my favorite cars, David Giddon, in the lovely little Lotus 23B, little junior sports racer with the twin cam engine in the back. Sensational debut at the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers when Jimmy Clark led the field by a long way. After a few laps, he was a minute and a half in front, but sadly, the exhaust manifold then split, and Jimmy was getting poisoned by the fumes and had to stop. But what a sensation to be miles quicker around the Nürburgring than the Works Ferraris, Lancias, Maseratis. Here's Steve Harris. He's not in an Austin Mini. What's he in? Toyota, I think, of some sort. Perhaps the Mini has misbehaved. He's nipped home and brought out his regular car. And he's followed by Kessel in a Mini that isn't a Mini. It's called a Maguire Mini. It's incredibly quick. It's 1360cc, a very highly developed engine. Time for Steve Harris was a 44.65. Derek will be considerably quicker than that. It's a space frame racing car, really, with kind of mini body in fiberglass on the top. And it's quick. Derek records a 33.87. Brings us to, for lots of people is one of the highlights of the meeting, the Ferraris in the Pirelli Ferrari Hill Climb Championship, led off by Paul Booth in the 458 Spider. That lovely V8 engine with 5 valves per cylinder. Of course, now Ferrari have gone hybrid with the latest model that produces something like 900 horsepower, but a lot of those horsepower are electric. And so we won't have that lovely noise. They'll have to put a sort of noise-making machine in the cars. We can pretend that they've got a V8 or a V12. 36.48 for Paul. Anthony Atwood, he's lying second in handicap in the results of this meeting. I don't know how he's getting on in the championship. It's actually the slowest Ferrari in the gang, but he's beating his handicap. And the engine doesn't sound 100% healthy. I think it's a very well used Dino. Such a pretty car. But it's a V6. It hasn't got enormous power and it's quite a heavy car. So by modern standards, it's not desperately quick, but it's desperately beautiful. And Anthony's time, 40.46. He makes way for Mark Wibberley in the Spider 3, 360 Spider. That V8 making a glorious sound and revving to some 8,500 revs. 83 through the speed trap. And heading away up to the top of the hill. 37.18. Amazing how little the hill has changed in 115 years. There are fewer trees down the bottom, but essentially, it's been resurfaced, of course, lots of times, but essentially it's exactly the same hill with which the Midland Automobile Club started 115 years ago. What a history. It's just wonderful. Here's Pauline Goodwin. I think she's leading the way on handicap today in her lovely 328. 3.2 litre V8 in the back, 308 and 328, the first rear engine Ferraris to have a V8 rather than a V6. And some of the 328s had steel bodies and some had fiberglass bodies. We don't know what Pauline's is, but we've got a feast of our eyes following that 328 in the shape of John Goodwin's lovely 250 short wheelbase GT. What a fabulous car. 3 litre, the classic V12. And we talk about the stratospheric values of the Ferrari GTO. Well, the short wheelbases aren't that far behind. So it may not be the quickest, but it's the prettiest and makes the nicest noise, I think. 69, John Goodwin into bottom S. And the last of our Ferraris is the Dino 308 GT4, which is a 2+2. Well, if you've got tiny children, it is, with the Bertone body, which doesn't have the swooping lines of the classic Ferrari. Was criticized, but was a very effective machine in its day. Time for John Goodwin in the short wheelbase, 40.16, 40.16. Good to see Finlay McIntosh. He's got the gremlins out of the Cooper Jap. He's on the start line. Let's just watch. If you're watching the screen, you need to have your eyes pointing in different directions, with Finlay starting and Ian Atwood finishing. Ian Atwood in the 308, 40.11. Finlay in the first of our Coopers with the Jap engine. J.A. Prestwich in the Black Country. Going really well, Finlay. He's sharing the car, so that's why he's running this batch and not with the rest of the 500s. Malcolm Redgwell on his own in the Trident Engineering Welsh Sprint and Hill Climb Championship. No, he's not. He's got 3 others in the championship here today, but he's sharing this car with Daniel Redgwell. But when the Renault has finished, we've got the excitement of our really quick cars. Simon Andrews, massively quick, 2.07, sharing the 2.8 litre V8 OMS 28 with Bernard Kevel. 112 S approach, safely navigates the S's, time through the S's 8.37, which is quick, and it's a 27.03, should certainly get him in the top 10. I'll be able to tell you who's in the top 10 pretty soon after they've had their second runs. Any minute now. So we've got one more batch to come with 12 or so cars in it, including the rest of the 500cc Formula 3 cars from the 40s and early 50s. Sadly, only one of the Cooper V-twins, the 1100cc V-twin Coopers. And then our climax of the meeting will be our top 10 runoff. On a normal championship meeting for the British Hill Climb Championship, of which I think there are 26 rounds throughout the season, this year, of course, sadly, it had to be cancelled completely, but what happens is that if you want to compete in the championship, you register, and at each meeting, the fastest 12 registered cars in the class runs take part in the championship runoff. And that happens halfway after the first runs and at the end of the meeting after the second runs. And points are scored by the fastest 10 runners. So 10 points for a win. Extra point if you break the record. And here are our runners in the top 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Well, the fastest 15 runners, of which 10 of them will get in the runoff. Quickest, Alex Summers, 23.14. Second, Trevor Willis, 23.3. Third, Paul Hames, 24.55. 10th, David Warburton, 24.6. Not 10th, what am I talking about? 4th, David. 5th, Alan Warburton, 25.77. 6th, Stuart Bickley, 26.9. 7th, Lindsay Summers, 26.86. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th, Lindsay. 9th, Simon Andrews. And 10th, Bernard Kevel. So Clive Austin looks as if he's just missed the cut. But I'll get confirmation of the running order because some of those cars are shared, and the shared cars, of course, run first and then come straight down the hill. Now, somebody asked, I hope you keep live streaming when things get back to normal. Well, we hope. I think the answer, Adrian, is that we might well live stream the really important meetings, the championship meetings, and maybe Classic Nostalgia. I hope so. But as you can appreciate, it all costs money. It's quite a complex setup, and Rich Danby does and his team do a fantastic job But it would be good, I agree with you, for people who are watching who aren't able to come to Shelsley in person. Retro Ride says, live stream everything all the time in motorsport. That's how you pick up fans and get them coming to your event in person. Yeah, well, you might be right. And in theory, we ought to do that. Now, Pirelli Ferrari class provisional results after performance equalizing percentage has been applied. First, Pauline Goodwin. Second, Mark Wibberley. And third, Anthony Atwood. So, congratulations to them. Tim King tells us that James Thacker's Frog Eye Sprite was rebuilt by Kim Johnson, who sadly passed away earlier this week. Toby, message from Toby, all the way from Le Mans. Well done, everyone. Looks another wonderful day there. How good has Rob Anscombe done to find nearly a full second in just over a week? Yeah, you're right. Toby, I hope you've enjoyed your hard work at Le Mans and aren't too tired. Yeah, thanks, Eddie, again, putting me right. It was, of course, Ralph Furman who started the Van Diemen company, and Ralph being an Australian, Van Diemen, Australia, before it was called Australia, was called Van Diemen's Land, and hence the name. It's really embarrassing sitting here having to be corrected all the time by the person who knows everything in the shape of Eddie Walder. But I can put up with it. Eddie, keep doing it. Okay, we've got our last batch to come. Hang on in there, guys. Don't switch your screen off or don't leave Shelsley, because we've got our top 10 to come, and that'll be the climax of our crazy year at Shelsley. But among the bad, there's always the good, and the good has been that we've had 3 glorious weekends of competition. Here we go. And here we go with the 500s. And it'll be, it's not Bernard Kevill, it's Max McIntosh sharing with Finley the Cooper Jap Mark 8-ish, I think, Mark 7 or Mark 8. Car from the mid-50s with the Jap engine in the back. These cars are all nowadays, they used to be fairly scruffy, they're now beautifully restored and immaculate. Max heads for the S's. 69 is respectable into the S's, neat and tidy through the S's, and heads for the finish. He's going to be followed by Andrew Rayner, an older one, the Mark 5. Mark 5 was from the early 50s, sort of 53, 54. We're talking about the Norton engine, and you remember the Van Wall. The Van Wall engine was effectively four Norton cylinder heads on a Rolls-Royce block. So Vanmore had effectively the same cylinder heads as the Norton in this Cooper. This is Andrew Rayner. In the Mark V. He's not quite as quick as Max McIntosh into bottom S. Nich on his way in the Star Ride, sitting right at the front of the car, as always, and as always beautifully prepared. Star Ride with a Norton engine. Andrew Rayner 45.94. Jan into bottom S at 70 on the line. Mike Wood in the Iota. And Jan racing up the finishing line. Crosses at 71, 40.09. Here comes the Iota. A lot of these 500s had very exotic suspension using rubber bands and all sorts of crazy things. Technically, they're very interesting to look at because, of course, everybody wanted the lightest possible weight, and steel springs weigh heavy. Mike Wood, 67 S approach. Charles Reynolds, our so 1100cc V-twin, takes off the line. Lovely deep-throated boom of the 1100cc Jap engine. Mike Wood's time 41.11. Our quickest 500, I think, was Max McIntosh or Finlay in the Mark 7 or Mark 8 Cooper. Here's Charles Reynolds. And just showing the contrast in hill climbing, a Cooper 500 and a Porsche Carrera on the hill at the same time. Geraint Evans in the Porsche Carrera 3. Petro Canada Lubricants Porsche Club Speed Championship. Only 2 entries, Geraint and Howard Cressy in the Cayman. That's on the line. Geraint's time 34.7. Here's the Cayman, nice bright red Cayman S, 3.4 litre flat 6 in the middle of the car. And then to follow our 3 more runners in the Trident Engineering Welsh Sprint and Hill Climb Championship. We'll round out our class runs of the day and leave the way for our top 10 runoff. Here's the Cayman on the line with 38.95. Bob Penrose going quickly in the OMS. Sharing the car with Robert. I guess it's father-son. And away goes Daniel Redgwell in the clear 182. Bob finishes with a 34.29 in the OMS. Daniel's going well in this hot little hatch Renault Clio. 76 is quick into bottom S. And our final runner is Carol Nichols, final class runner, Carol Nichols in the Nike single-seater built by her dad. Carol is hill climbing this car all over the place this year, getting as much action in it as she can possibly get, and good for her. Time for the Renault was 37.91. I will very shortly, I think, get a note of the order in which our top 10 are going to run. In the meantime, Carroll beats her up in 39.35. John Staveley, he tells me that Van Diemen's Land was the name for Tasmania. Well, John, you might be right. Toby Moody, I did the night shift in pit lane, so rather tired. Not surprised at Le Mans. Le Mans and Shelsley Walsh proper places. Good luck, everyone, for the last runs of 2020. Adam Gittings would like us to provide the smell of Castor R on the live stream. What a nice idea. Do you remember the smell of Castor R? I remember going to the Pool Pirates Speedway and breathing in the whiff of Castor R. Unfortunately, vegetable oils have gone out of fashion, and so we don't get it anymore. Get more detail on Van Diemen from Mark Dauncey, who says that Rob Ambrose, who founded Van Diemen with Ralph Furman, came from Tasmania, which was known as Van Diemen's Land. Thank you for that. Tasmania is a wonderful island to visit, quite extraordinary. It was a convict colony. It's beautiful landscape, but the funny thing is you drive through the towns in Tasmania and the villages, and they've all got English names. So you drive from Winchester to Tunbridge to Bury St Edmunds and places like that. You think, hang on, are we back in England? But it's got an amazing history, because when the convicts had finished their imprisonment term, well, of course, it wasn't really imprisonment, they were just stuck on the island. They were allowed to have a property on Tasmania and have a little farm or a little building business. So really it was, unlike some of the convict prisons, it was really for rehabilitating people, the convicts who'd been sent there. So if you ever have a chance to go to Tasmania, if ever you're visiting Australia, do take the opportunity. It's the most fascinating place to visit. Right, our runoff. First runner is going to be Bernard Kevill, followed by Lindsay Summers, and then Alan Warburton. And those three cars will then return down to the start because they're being shared. Next comes Clive Austin. I was wrong. Clive Austin has got into the top 10. Great. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth runner will be Simon Andrews in the OMS, who of course is sharing with Bernard Kevill. Then Stuart Bickley in the Little Jedi. Great to get into the top 10. Then David Warburton. Alan will jump out. David will jump in. Then our top three will be Paul Hames in the GR59, Trevor Willis in the OMS, and Alex Summers in the DJ Firestorm. People have repeated in the past that Cosworth XD engine produces something like 700 horsepower, but it doesn't. It's producing about 550. But when it was turbocharged and used at Indianapolis, it was producing something like 800. Bernard Kevill qualified with a 27.13, Lindsay Summers with a 26.86, Alan Warburton with a 25.68, Clive Austin with a 27.61, Simon Andrews 27.03, Stuart Bickley with a 26.8, David Warburton with a 24.60, Paul Hames with a 24.55, Trevor Willis with a 23.3, and Alex Summers with 23 dead. So it's going to be a mega battle and worth waiting for. It's only 4:15, sun's still shining nicely. Eddie Walder agrees that Tasmania is indeed a magical place. It is. So let's hope the next year we'll have a full season of hill climbing. The season usually starts in May at Shelsley. And then we have Classic Nostalgia a little bit later on, which is at exactly what it says on the tin. It's classic cars and it's nostalgia, and people dress up and there's dancing in the courtyard. It's a lovely, lovely weekend. The Hill Climb Championship comes here in August. And so through the year, we have a number of meetings here at Shelsley, all of which are great to come and watch. There's another firestorm on the hills, which was in the hands of Wallace Mingies, who won the championship last year. With the V8 engine was 3.3 litres, and I'm told it was 800 bhp plus. He also tells us that in Indy qualifying, when they really screwed the turbo down tight, it was producing 960 bhp, which is enough for anybody really. But he confirms that at the moment the XD in Alex's car is just over 500 horsepower. So here we go with our top 10 runoff, and it's kicked off by Bernard Kevel. In the OMS 28, with the TKD V8 in the back. Qualified with a 27.13. Wouldn't he love to be in the 26s? Might well be as well. Doesn't have a power advantage. It produces about 350 horsepower. Nicely off the line, 2.09. Little bit of a lift into kennel. No dramas at crossing. Often we get sparks at the kick, but we haven't done today. Into bottom S at 110. Out of top S and foot down. I think there was one gear change over the line at 118 to record a 27.24. 27.24 for Bernard. Next up, Lindsay Summers. Here she is, sharing the car, of course, with son Alex. Lindsay, 26.86. Qualified. Great start, 1.98, really good. We've got the time clicking up on the screen. But she's heading for bottom S, 102 into bottom S, so Lindsay wisely early on the brakes into bottom S. Now in the S sector, is it about 8 seconds? It's 8.79, and then she'll be very quick over the line. 140 over the finishing line to record a 26.67, quicker than Lindsay's qualifying 26.86. Great run. Third of the double-driven cars is Alan Warburton, sharing the car with his son David. Qualified with a 25.68 in the Gould, with its 1600cc. It's Hayabusa Borden stroked out to 1600cc. And it's a brilliant start in 1.92. How Alan gets into this car, I don't know. He's about 6'4". Into bottom S at 116. Through the S's at 7.73, which is par for the course. Pretty good, in fact, very good. And a 25.47. Again, slightly quicker than his 25.68 qualifying figure. So, red flags are out, which means that those cars will come down. Those drivers will jump out, co-drivers will jump in, and our next car up the hill will be Clive Austin. Clive in the Empire Wraith, I beg his pardon. Clive lives just in the village at the top of the hill, so he hasn't got far to commute to compete here at Shelsley. Another of the traditions here at Shelsley at a championship meeting is that the top three finalists in the championship run-offs stop on the way down. They don't turn right into the paddock as they're now just about to do. They go straight on down to the start line and have the prize giving there. That won't happen. I don't think that will happen today. So the rest of our runners beginning to get ready to come up to the pre-start. Next runner will be Clive Austin. And you can see Clive at the exit to the paddock, so he won't come out of the side paddock, which is for the double-driven cars. And he'll be followed out by Simon Andrews, who will come out from the right. I can see the white car there now. They're working to maybe change the seat cushions for Bernard to come out, Simon to get in. Some years ago, you didn't carry a battery on the car because batteries in those days were pretty heavy, although they had a starter motor, of course. But you had to plug in an external battery. Nowadays, these modern lithium batteries are so small and light and powerful that it's no real handicap to actually have an onboard battery, which means that if you stall, you could just press the button and start the car again. You don't have to run up with a battery trolley. It was a real palaver in my day, bringing 24 volts very often to start up a big engine. Okay, our flags are in. We're getting ready for Clive to bring the Empire Wraith to the start line. Yep, he's being waved forward. So at the moment, Alan Warburton is quickest with 25.47. Lindsay Summers comes next with 26.67, and Bernard Kevel 27.24. What can Clive do? Can he get in the top three? Let's see. He turns on his GoPro camera, so we'll get an onboard video of this run, probably on YouTube, which will be really interesting to watch. What a revolution in video production these GoPros have provided. Amazing. After crossing, it's not so easy. You're driving into a sun that's getting quite low, so it can be quite dazzling. Clive records 2.05 off the line, doesn't lift at all for Kennel, which takes a degree of courage. Out of the sun, into the shadow. And his speed, 99, so early-ish braking for bottom S. Gives him a good line into top S and away down the finishing straight. It's a 28, no, it's 29.32. Clive not really trying all that hard. A nice, neat run, enjoying the fun of having a third competitive run at Shelsley, and his season ends with a 29.32. Out of the side paddock will come Simon Andrews. Of course, it's nice to be in the runoff, but it isn't a championship. There are no prizes. It's just for personal fun and personal honour. Although whether Trevor Willis and Alex Summers view it that way, I don't know. It's a needle match. But of course, at a championship meeting in the runoff, usually competitors have kept either a brand new or a very new set of tyres for their runoff runs, and you get some frantic tyre changing, wheel changing before the final runoff run. I don't think, in fact I'm pretty sure that won't be happening today. Lindsay, according to V8 Firestorm, you are awesome. Well, he's right. You're awesome driving that car. Here's Simon with the V8 powered TKD engined OMS 28. Similar car to the one driven by Trevor Willis, but with a different engine. Simon's shares the car with Bernard, and Bernard did a 27.24, Bernard Kevill. Simon hustles through crossing and lifts fairly early at 112 into bottom S, gets it back over to the left-hand side to open up top S, and now one or maybe two gear changes and 27.35. Not quite as quick as his 27.03 qualifying run, but it puts Simon into fourth place at the moment. Stuart Bickley is next. In the little Jedi. Qualified with a fantastic 26.8 in this little car. 1 litre car, remember. And 1 litre not turbocharged or supercharged. Small and light. Plenty of downforce. And very well driven. Absolutely maxes it through. The S sector at 7.82 is really quick through the S's. 26.59 for Stuart. He'll be pleased. 2/10 or so quicker than his qualifying run. Now we've got David Warburton. David qualified with a 24.6, so we're in the top 4, all in the 23s and 24s. Wouldn't David love to get this car into the 23s? But of course, you can understand if he doesn't, because it's not a championship, it's not necessary to go absolutely crazy. As long as he beats his dad, that's probably the most important thing. 1.92. Good. And not a lift at all at Kennel. Flat through, crossing. This is quick. This is 122 into bottom S. Wow. Slight twitch out of bottom S, getting the power down, but no dramas. It's a 24.56. 24.56 for David. 116 over the line. Great run. Nice and neat and tidy. Paul Hames next. Paul Hames in the GR59, only with 1300 cc's, but turbocharged, and qualified with a 24.55, so there's plenty of power there. And the car is light, of course, 400 or so kilos. Very advanced aerodynamics. Down comes the visor into the sun, not easy. Really concentrating on getting the start. 2.15 is pretty good. Into the sun and then into the dark, it's not easy at all. Nice, really close into the bank at crossing. 121 into bottom S. Can't believe the speed with 1300cc. It is amazing, this modern technology. 3 or 4 gear changes and over the line at 139. Wow, 24.96 for Paul. Super. Lindsay, I don't know if you heard. V8 Firestorm says you're awesome. I think we all agree. Here's somebody else who's awesome. It's Trevor Willis in the OMS 28 that he's driven for a number of years with its PowerTech V8 engine in the back, 3.2 litres. Not the ultimate power output, but combined with the skill of Trevor and the design of the OMS. Steve Owen up in Yorkshire produces these OMSs, and they progressively have got more sophisticated and more fast. 1.85 off the line. That is special. 131 into bottom S. Ooh, wow! Oversteer out of bottom S. Trevor gathers it all up double quick, and it's a 23.1. 23.1. Brilliant run. 135 over the line. That'll take some beating. 23.1 for Trevor Willis. Qualified with a 23.3. Alex on the line. He qualified with a 23 dead. So to win this runoff, he needs to be quicker than 23.1 seconds. Remember the record here, 22.58. 1.83 compared with 1.85. 200ths quicker than Trevor. And 140 into bottom S. Hold your breath. Absolutely brilliant. 7.3 through the S's is mega, and it's a 22.71. Wow, Alex, fantastic. 2 tenths, less than 2 tenths, 1 and a bit tenths away from the record at Shelsley. What a way to finish our season here at Shelsley Walsh. Wonderful. What a treat. Well done everybody who's competed, well done everybody who has come as a spectator, particularly well done to our marshals and officials. Marshals, as always, a fantastic job. Our team in the office have worked like crazy and have produced a fabulous result. What a lovely weekend. Thank you for coming if you've come in person. Thank you for watching if you're watching on stream. And we look forward to a proper season next year. Keep your fingers crossed. In the meantime, I wish you a pleasant autumn and a pleasant, peaceful winter, and let's pray that we get through this horrible pandemic as quick as possible. This is Chris Druitt saying goodbye from Shelsley. We'll talk to you again in 2021. Bye now.
sending that out now?
Yeah, we're bored, yeah.
It's an underpowered car, isn't it? Yeah.
Well done, Sarah. You can have a holiday now.
Amazing job.
I'm not so bothered, but I didn't put in another review. Didn't need to. Remember my invoices for 200. Cheers, Richard.